All right, greetings everyone. Welcome to the third part of the video now for section 5.1. Continuing on with our study of circles and some of their properties and their equations. Okay, so let's do some algebra now with the equations of circles since we've now had some experience with them. So here we're given the equation of the circle that is given by x plus 1 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 9. We're asked to find the coordinates of the vertical intercept or intercepts. Now let's first think about visually what this means. If we're talking about a circle in the coordinate plane, which using the points I'm given here, the center would be at -1, 2, radius of 3. The circle is probably going to look something like this. What do we mean by the vertical intercepts? Well, those would be the points where this circle intercepts the vertical axis. So that would be like the point here and here. So the way I've drawn this looks like this one would have 2. Some of circles may have only 1, and some actually might have none. So we'll find out what happens with this one. Now recall that for any sort of a vertical intercept, for any sort of function, the form of that is 0, comma, a number. It'll be the same thing for this one. And think about why that is, right? On the vertical axis, the input value, which in this case would be the x value, but it will not always be the x value if we're not using x's and y's. So the input value is always 0, and then the output value is how much you go up or down on that axis, right? So given that information, how could we go about finding the vertical intercept or vertical intercepts of this equation? Right, let's just plug in 0 for our input for x and go from there. So I'll do that, so I'll make this 0 plus 1 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 9. And then notice now all we have to do is solve for the value of y. So let's go through and do some simplifying. 0 plus 1 is 1 squared will just give us 1. Plus, for right now, I'm going to leave this as y minus 2 squared equals 9. You can start solving for y by subtracting 1 on both sides. These will cancel. So we'll now have y minus 2 squared equals 8. Take a square root on both sides, and recall that when we are solving and we take a square root, we always get 2 answers, which we show with a plus or minus. So this would become then on the left-hand side there, the squared and the square root will cancel out, so we'll just have y minus 2 equals, we'll have the plus or minus square root of 8, which for those of you with experience with radicals, I know we could simplify that root 8. I'm not going to worry about that for right now. Then just add 2 to both sides to finish isolating the y. So we now end up with y equals 2 plus or minus square root of 8 here. Okay, and notice the plus or minus there shows us that we have 2 answers. And so remember, we started this process by plugging in 0 for x. So it looks like now our coordinates of our 2 vertical intercepts would be 0, comma, the first thing we get here, which is 2 plus square root of 8, or 0, comma, the second thing we get, which is 2 minus square root of 8. So those would be our 2 what we would call exact answers. Okay, so notice I haven't converted those into decimals. I've left them as is. And again, as I mentioned, I know for those of us with lots of experience with radicals, these square roots of 8 could be simplified. I'm going to leave them like that for right now. So those would be our exact answers, but let's say we were looking for some approximations or wanted to know some decimal versions of these. We could plug these into our calculators. Have 0, comma, if we do the 2 plus square root of 8, on my calculator I get 4.828. And then if I do the 0, comma 2 minus square root of 8 in my calculator, that gives me 0, comma negative 0.828. Okay, so either version of these would be acceptable. In this case, since we weren't specified on whether we needed to find exact or approximate answers. Wasn't that fun? Yeah, I agree. All right, let's do something else similar. Let's look at this problem. So we're told that for the unit circle, which is given by the equation x squared plus y squared equals 1, and we'll talk more about what the unit circle is later in this chapter, but just to kind of give you a preview, if you were to analyze this, you would hopefully find that the center of the circle is at the point 0, 0, and the radius is 1. So that's a special type of circle we call the unit circle. And we will, check this one out, circle back around to that. Man, I'm funny. Okay. So we're asked to find the value of x when y is 1/2. So that is our goal here. So let's look at how we could do that. Well, hopefully you would agree that we can approach this one very similar to the way that we approached the last one, right? In the last one, we knew what the values of x had to be. They all had to be 0 for the vertical intercepts. And so we plugged those in and used them to find the values for y. Well, let's do a similar thing here. We know what the value of y has to be. Let's use that to help us solve for the value or values of x. So we'll plug in 1/2 for y here. So this will become x squared plus, and this will become a 1/2 squared equals 1. I have x squared plus the 1/2 squared gives us 1/4 equals 1. And we can subtract 1/4 from both sides. And so we'll end up with then x squared equals, we do the 1 minus the 1/4. Keeping in mind our fraction rules, that would become 3/4. And so we'll solve this now to find the value or values for x. So I'm going to rewrite it here. So we have x squared now equals 3/4. Let's go ahead and take the square root on both sides. And on the left side, taking the square root of x squared, that cancels out the squared and the square root for us. This becomes x. On the right-hand side, again, remember, because we took a square root to solve, we need to put our plus or minus here. So we have plus or minus square root of 3/4, which now we're going to do a little bit of simplifying with this. So when we're taking the square root of a fraction, we can actually break this into two parts. So we can make this plus or minus the square root of the top, which is square root of 3, over the square root of the bottom, which would become square root of 4. And notice then, doing that, okay, well the root 3 we can't really do much with, so I'm going to leave that as square root of 3, but the square root of 4 we can, right? The square root of 4, if you think about that, is 2. So it looks like we get plus or minus root 3 over 2 here. I know the root 3 would give us a decimal, so I'm actually going to leave that for an exact answer here. And so it looks like our values of x when y is 1/2 would be positive or negative square root of 3 over 2. So it looks like there are two possibilities for what we could have. Okay? All right, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you for watching.